Elizabeth Warren has taken an important step in her 2020 campaign, as she's now saying no to fundraisers and no to phone calls with wealthy donors. And the article also goes on to say that she's saying no to dinners and no to receptions as well with wealthy donors. Now, this is an aspect of campaign fundraising that often gets overlooked. Oftentimes, we are more focused on corporate PAC money and the impact that these corporations have on these politicians through corporate PAC money. But large donations are a problem as well. Now, a large donation by itself isn't an issue. So a large donation is anything over $200. So if you give, Elizabeth Warren or Bernie Sanders or Kamala Harris $300, $400, you're likely not going to have an impact on their campaign. But it's how do these candidates raise a lot of that large donor money? Are they holding fundraisers with, say, Wall Street, that's $2,700 a plate? Because that's going to have an impact on what these politicians do, or fundraisers with Big Pharma at $2,700 a plate. So that is the issue. It's the company you keep. It's who you surround yourself with. It's who you're having these face-to-face conversations with. If you're having these conversations, these face-to-face conversations, these phone calls, these receptions, these dinners with these large donors from particular industries, well, that's clearly going to have an impact on your policy making, whether you realize it or not. This is what people miss. Even if these politicians say that, oh no, it doesn't have an impact on me, think about it yourself. If you are surrounded with people that think a certain way about certain issues and they are giving you money, that is going to have an impact on you, if not directly, then indirectly. Subconsciously, it's going to have an impact on you because you're going to have more of an awareness of their worldview as opposed to the worldview of the vast majority of Americans. So before I go on to some examples of candidates that are not doing this, let me read this piece from the CNN article where Warren actually takes some direct shots at other candidates. So here's what she said. For every time you see a presidential candidate talking with voters at a town hall, rally, or local diner, those same candidates are spending 3 or 4 or 5 times as long with wealthy donors, on the phone, or in conference rooms at hedge fund offices, or at fancy receptions and intimate dinners, all behind closed doors, Warren wrote. When I thank the people giving to my campaign, it will not be based on the size of their donation. Now, I do have to say something before I keep going. There is an unfortunate twist to this story, and I will get to that near the end of the video, but you have to stay for it because this isn't the full picture yet. But just to give you an idea of who else is doing this, nobody. Nobody else except for Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is the only other candidate in the race who is already doing this. He doesn't have these fancy dinners with large donors. He just depends on grassroots support and small individual donations. Now, here are some examples, though, of other 2020 candidates that are having these sorts of fundraisers. So here's one example. Kirsten Gillibrand. Pfizer executive Sally Sussman to host 2020 presidential fundraiser for Democrat Kirsten Gillibrand. Now, Pfizer, of course, is a big pharma company. Now, do you think they are holding this fundraiser for a reason? You don't give to a candidate if you don't think you're going to have some impact on them. Kirsten Gillibrand also understands this. This is why Pfizer is not having these fundraisers with Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren, because they know that they are rejecting these fundraisers. They understand that Bernie and Warren are not going to listen to them. But if they can get somebody like Kirsten Gillibrand on their side who will listen to them, then they're willing to give the money. Another example, Kamala Harris. So Kamala Harris is holding this big fundraiser in Hollywood at $2,800 to $10,000 a person, which I have to do a little more research into this because that's illegal. You can't take over $2,700 from one person. So I'm not quite sure how they are doing this fundraising, but this is a fundraiser that's going to be hosted at J.J. Abrams' house. So yeah, Kamala Harris has a long history with Hollywood. Another example of that is back in 2017. Look who she was having a fundraiser with. Senator Kamala Harris to hit Hampton's power circuit with Harvey Weinstein. And this was only a few months before the sexual assault scandal hit. So Kamala Harris and her donor base, she shares a lot with Hillary Clinton and her donors. And in fact, in 2017, Kamala Harris was also having meetings with Hillary Clinton donors, just to give you an idea of who backs Kamala Harris. Another example, Cory Booker. So manufacturers of Tijuana tear gas are also Cory Booker supporters. Now, this was the tear gas that was used on the migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border, and they have held fundraisers for Cory Booker. Again, this is one of many examples. All these candidates have had multiple private fundraisers like this. This is just one of many. And here's somebody else. So someone that often gets brought up by progressives, especially in my comments, and I see it on Twitter a lot as well, is Tulsi Gabbard. So Tulsi Gabbard, for some people, even she appears to be the front runner for their choice for the Democratic primary for 2020. But Tulsi Gabbard also has these private fundraisers. So before I even get to an example of that, let's just take a look at where she gets her money from. So Tulsi Gabbard, the majority of her money, almost 60%, comes from large individual contributors. Now, compare that to Bernie Sanders, where he gets 75% from small individual donors and only 22% from large individual donors. And even Elizabeth Warren, 55% from small individual contributors and 31% from 31% from large individual contributors. And this was at a time when she was still holding these sorts of big fundraisers, but she was still mostly relying on small individual donors. Now, here is one of the fundraisers that Tulsi Gabbard is having. So this was August 31st. This was, please join Shep Gordon at a fundraiser to support Hawaii Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard. Suggested donation levels: friends $1,000, partners $500, guests $125. And the partners and friends got to meet with Tulsi Gabbard before the event actually started. So, look, Tulsi Gabbard, to be fair to her, she is a congresswoman, so she has less of a profile, of a national profile, than these senators do. So when you are a congresswoman, less people are going to know who you are. So you're going to have to rely on more money, somehow be able to raise that money. And in her case, she relies on these sorts of fundraisers. Now, I mean, in defense of her, she is better on these issues. But, I mean, if you're wealthy and you can attend these fundraisers, you're going to have Tulsi's ear in a way that most people won't. And that's part of the problem with these large fundraisers, is if you have the money to be able to give to these candidates, you have more of a say. They have more of a chance of listening to what your concerns are than the average person who can't afford $1,000 or $500 a plate. Now, here's the little twist. So Elizabeth Warren, while she is doing this for the primary, she's rejecting all this wealthy donor, all these big fundraisers, these private meetings with wealthy donors during the primaries. She is not doing that if she happens to win the nomination. So here is Elizabeth Warren on the Young Turks answering this question.
Does this only apply in the primaries, or will you carry this over to the general election or any other election you'll have going forward?
So this is for primaries. Look, I do not believe in unilateral disarmament. We need to win. We need to win in 2020. And when we hit 2020 and we're in a race against Donald Trump, when we're in a race for control of the Senate and control of the House and in control of the state houses and the governor's mansions, in all of those, the Republicans are going to be bringing a lot of money, a lot of power, a lot of dark money, a lot of super PACs, all to the fight. We play by the same rules. And in that one, I say we got to be all in, because we have to beat the Republicans.
All right. This is stupid. This is really stupid. Let me tell you why. So on the face of it, you may think, oh, but if the Republicans are raising all this money, then won't it be unfair? Elizabeth Warren has to also raise the money. This is very dumb strategically. If you are running for president, people will know who you are. You don't have to have these fundraisers with wealthy donors to be able to raise money. You're going to have a national profile. It's going to be you or Trump. Why exactly do you need to have these private fundraisers with wealthy donors? It defeats the entire purpose. If you're not taking the money during the primaries because you understand how it has the perception and the reality of having an impact on politicians and their campaigning and their policy making, then why would you accept it in the actual general election? I mean, think of it this way. Trump can now be on a stage with Elizabeth Warren, if she happens to be the nominee, and say, well, you're taking all this money from all these, from Wall Street and Big Pharma, and he can do exactly what he did to Hillary Clinton, even though, yes, we all know that he took the money as well, but he fooled enough people into thinking that, no, because I'm a billionaire, I'm self-funded, and no, only Hillary Clinton's taking the money. He can do the same thing with Elizabeth Warren, saying, oh, I'm a billionaire, I'm self-funded. No, Elizabeth Warren's taking the money. But if she doesn't do that, say, Bernie Sanders, if he wins the nomination and he doesn't take, or he doesn't have these private fundraisers, he doesn't have super PACs, he just still relies on grassroots support, imagine the confidence that puts in voters. That means that people at home understand that you are not bought, that no matter what happens in the campaign, voters understand that, oh, Bernie has run like this his entire time. The entire time he's been just running on grassroots support, on small individual donors. We can even look and see who has given him money. We can see that, no, he doesn't have any super PACs. No, he doesn't have any of these big fundraisers with wealthy donors. People can understand and differentiate Bernie Sanders, who is the real deal, who is just propped up by grassroots support and small donations, versus fucking Donald Trump, who his entire career has been a fraud. He is, just like in 2016, he was propped up by big donor money, but pretended he wasn't. This time, he wouldn't be able to play that game because it would be obvious and clear who is bought and who isn't. You can't do this in the general election. This is my issue with Warren as a whole. She has terrible political instincts. She had terrible political instincts when she didn't endorse Bernie Sanders in 2016, and she has terrible political instincts now when she thinks that she has to take on this big money in the general election, even though she's not doing it in the primaries. It is so stupid. So I hope she changes her mind on this. There's plenty of time. Regardless, I don't think she's going to win the nomination, so ultimately this really doesn't matter. But it's just so stupid strategically. You don't need the private fundraisers to win in the general election because it's going to be you or Trump. You give people the option saying, look, I am simply in this race for the people, as I'm only taking money for the people. I'm only listening to the people of this country. I'm not having private fundraisers. On the other hand, Donald Trump, first, look at who's in his cabinet. Look at what he's done. Look at who's around him. And on top of all that, look at where he's taking money from. You have to be able to differentiate yourself in the general election against Donald Trump on the fundraising level, or else people are not going to trust you.